This is Karen with New Cleveland Radio, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. And today's Avoid the Maze is a little bit different. My friend, Ann Leighton, she is a wonderful PR person, much more than that. But every once in a while, she'll say to me, Karen, I have somebody who you may like to talk to. And she sort of dropped the name of Harry Chapin first, and then David Fish. And then I said, I think I know both names, but I was thinking of another David Fish. Sorry about that, David. But the David Fish that I know doesn't have the talent that you have. So that's what we're going to talk about today, because you are a musician, you're a writer, you producer as well, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
So how did you get into this business? Give us a little bit of background about yourself.
Boy, well, there's the short version, and first of all, thanks for speaking. I appreciate this very much. There's the short version of that story and the long version of it. How about I'll try to make it in between?
Okay, that's fair.
I grew up as a jazz saxophonist, and I pursued that through college and then right out of college. But I found out there were two problems in becoming a professional jazz saxophonist. One, there are a lot of great performers out there. I knew this because I moved out to LA to try to start my career there. And there was an opportunity to audition for the band for the Tonight Show. And I went to it, and there had to be, if it was tenor saxophone, there had to be at least 100 other guys just as good, if not better than I, auditioning, right? So I did the math and figured, well, this is probably not getting me anywhere quickly. And especially since, jazz, I love jazz. I'm still, at heart a jazz, or I guess recovering jazz musician, something like that. But it's not that popular among the general people anymore, so there aren't that many opportunities, right? So I figured I need to do something different. So I went back to, as many people do, university, they go back to school, right? So I went back to school, and I had an interest in Japan. So you can see there are a lot of Japanese things in this room. And so I wound up studying something called ethnomusicology as a doctoral student at the University of Michigan. And ethnomusicology is two things. It's the study of the cultural aspects of music, and that's also a study of musics of other cultures. In my case, I studied traditional Japanese festival music. So I lived in Japan for a number of years doing that, doing field work. Came back and and became a professor of music in ethnomusicology. But somewhere in there, Karen, and I'm hazy about when and how, somehow I became interested in being a singer-songwriter, right? And that's because I've got an album coming out February next year, Renaissance record. It's called Last Troubadour. The troubadours, in that sense, were those great performers like Jim Croce and James Taylor, Cat Stevens, Harry Chapin, from the 70s. That was just the golden age of guitar-wielding folk rock singer-songwriters. And I'm a little bit younger than that, but not much. I'm essentially still from that generation, right? So I was just enamored of that, and at some point decided to pick up a guitar and try my hand at it. But anyway, I started an ethnomusicology program at a little college in North Carolina, still in the state here. Didn't get so far with that, but I looked around and realized there were lots of great jazz programs. There were no programs of studies for popular music, or very few, right? Certainly there weren't any in North Carolina. So I wound up starting a program of study for popular music students at Catawba College in Salisbury, North Carolina, just north of Catawba, and did that for 20, 25 years, something like that, right? Put my music making on hold during that time, right? I'm transitioning out of that phase of my life. And it's kind of a fluke. I had got this opportunity to do a recording of my own music, and it's started to take on a life of its own wonderfully, and I've just been writing it ever since. So
I love it. I love it. I happen to be very close to the music industry for a lot of reasons. And one is that my middle brother, when he moved out to California, he had just finished architectural school, but he always wanted to be in music. And he packed up his Volkswagen Beetle and drove out to the West Coast. He parked it in front of a friend's house. And when he came out, everything was gone. But the car was still there, but everything was gone. And that's when he realized, hey, if I'm going to do my craft, I've got to do it. And guess what? I'm going to have to starve in the beginning to do it. And that was back in the late 60s, early 70s, right about the same time that you're talking about. And it's because of him that I've allowed myself to listen to different kinds of music and not to make a judgment before I hear it. Or maybe I hear it in different ways, because you may perform it one way, somebody else another way. And it's like, wow, this is what I like.
Yeah.
And,
Oh, that's wonderful.
And so, we've been doing these interviews now on New Cleveland for about 6 years.
Oh, wow.
And I get to meet people like yourself who have the talent, but many of us, if we're not in North Carolina and get to hear you, we may not even get to meet you. So I love the fact that you started in jazz, because jazz is one of my favorite elements in music. I'm not sure how I got into it, because I don't remember my parents playing much jazz music growing up. It was either Frank Sinatra or, I can't even think. Was it Ted Williams, who was a country singer with a twang? My father loved Hank Williams. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
So, Frank Sinatra, Hank Williams, they don't even go together, but that's what you heard in my house.
Yeah. Well, Frank certainly had one foot in jazz, though, right? And played with just astounding jazz musicians. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So how did this curriculum you put together, it sounds fascinating to me, because was your background in teaching?
Oh, yes. Well, kind of one of the dirty little secrets of being a professor, many of us are not taught how to teach before we become professors. But yes, I did. I was in a graduate assistant and taught a few classes and so forth. So yeah, and and I taught some private lessons and so forth down through the years. Yeah, so to a certain extent.
But it was more about sharing your love.
Well, or giving to students opportunities, educational opportunities that I didn't, right? Again, there are something like 2,000 four-year colleges and universities in the United States, right? And to this day, there are only maybe about a dozen that have programs of study for popular musicians, right? So, I just, when I went to school, there were no songwriting classes. There were no popular ensembles like rock or anything like that. I picked up that stuff, learned that stuff, catch as catch can. So I just wanted to create the sort of program that I wish I had going through school.
I think those are the best classes all of us can take when we're taking classes in college, because some of the ones that are just, here's the textbook and we're going to learn everything in the textbook, I usually quit the first day. Um,
Yeah,
so
some programs tend to get institutionalized, and a lot of the vim and vigor get ironed out of them. So,
well, and maybe I'm wrong, but teaching someone how to write a song, you have to have that feeling deep inside to want to put those words together.
yeah, boy, it's a really tricky thing, Karen. You know, my example A of this is Paul McCartney. Look at just the magical songs that he was churning out left and right in the 1960s. And for the most part, he spent the last 50 years trying to figure out how he did that in the 1960s, right?
Right.
So there's an element of, in terms of craft, you can get it completely right and it's still deader than a doornail, right? So there's an aspect of it it's just, I don't know, quixotic or something or other, and it's probably not the right word, but at any rate, you're lucky if you find those times when you do. Maybe the better metaphor is you can capture lightning in a jar, or a little bit of lightning in a jar. Right. So.
Well, I think it's interesting because my youngest son started out as a music major, and he just got too frustrated with it. He said, "Look, I don't play an instrument. My voice is my instrument." Yeah. He had thoughts going through his head. He was writing them on paper, and he knew what he wanted. And yet his professors kept asking for, okay, you know what you want, but try this. And he didn't want to try. And so after his first semester, he said, I'm going to change majors. Music is my love. I'm not going to let anybody destroy it for me.
Good for him. That's the type of music program that I built ours to try to be the diametrical opposite of, right? So, yeah.
So tell me about this song that you wrote. It came out on December the 2nd. We'll make sure we have a link to it before we finish today. And it's called Harry Chapin.
Yeah.
Why Harry Chapin of all the artists? I think he's terrific, but why?
Yeah, okay. And to make clear, it's out on YouTube December 2nd. It's the Renaissance Records, my record company, is releasing it sometime this week of December 5th. Okay. Apparently, it's not an exact science on how these things get released, even by record labels, unless I guess you're a major record label. But it's going to be out on Spotify and Apple Music and in all of those services as well. Yeah, but okay. But to your question, why Harry Chapin? Well, it's kind of Harry is maybe not as remembered as the other. He's remembered for a song or two, Cats in the Cradle, right? Right. Some people might remember his song Taxi. And my tribute to Harry Chapin actually borrows from the melody for Taxi, or steals. No, it's borrows me because I had copyright permission from the Chapin family, so it's all legal. But it borrows from Taxi. Well, Harry was absolutely and still is the heavyweight champion of story songs. Songs that tell an actual story, right? So many songs are lyrical in that they're kind of more interpretive as the listener to what they mean. And those are great because they allow you as the listener to kind of enter into the lyrics and kind of construct your own meaning yourself, right? Okay. Story songs are different. They tell an actual story, like Cats in the Cradle, about a father who isn't around much and misses his son growing up. And then when his son's grown up, the son doesn't have time for his father because he's emulated his father, right? So it's a different type of story, songwriting. And it's a little bit more difficult in a way, or it takes a different type of talent, because you need a moral to the story or something or other, or a meaning that's behind the story to animate it, right? So, for example, an equivalent of a story that's not a story song is The Gift of the Magi, right? So the plot is, he sells his watch fob, she cuts her hair, and they do that to give each other a present. And what he buys her a hair comb, and she, however that works. So that's the moral of the story, right? So Harry's songs would have these wonderful morals, or or meanings behind them as well. So that's it. There aren't many artists who could achieve that, singer-songwriters who achieve that. So I used to play, when I was decided I wanted to be a singer-songwriter, I'd play in a club, as the song says, on Monday nights. And there was a waitress there, middle-aged waitress, and she had been there for years, and she'd heard lots of artists, and she was friendly to us, the performers, especially the up-and-coming guys who were struggling. And for whatever reason, she kept saying, you should do a Harry Chapin song. Do a Harry Chapin song. Do a Harry Chapin. And he had already died in a car accident.
Right.
And I remembered, I basically put in the song, honey, Harry Chapin's dead, and nothing I can sing is going to bring him back again. Right. And so she kept working on me for a couple of months, singing Harry song. And so I've, like the song says, I asked her, I said, what do you want me to sing? What do you hear in Harry Chapin's tunes? He said, no, you're not understanding. It's what I hear in you. Right. So the answer for why Harry Chapin, it turns out that she revealed to me an affinity, natural affinity, between what I was trying to do as a songwriter and what Harry Chapin had done. And that was both a wonderful gift, and it was also a challenge for me not to then be sucked into the vortex of his talent, right? But anyway, that's why Harry Chapin. That's why Harry Chapin. Now, if you were to ask what's the moral of this story is, you find it at the very end, where I say, went back to the club after I'd listened to some Harry Chapin songs, went back to the club on Monday, got set up and tuned my guitar, looked around for the waitress, saw her standing at the bar. I said, this one's for a friend of mine who showed me that I've been wrong, right? This one's for Cathy. Here's a Harry Chapin song. So it's ultimately about the power of a song living beyond the artist, and the power of music.
Wow, I'm not even sure where I want to go with this right now.
Interview
over. It's quite interesting, because my husband and I grew up in different cities, different states, different cultural backgrounds. And when we met, we were both in our mid-30s, and we were listening to the radio one day. Yeah, everybody, radio, you listen to music, not necessarily just in your ears. And Cats in the Cradle came on. And the two of us both said at the same time, my favorite song, but it's so sad.
Oh, yeah.
And our reasons were totally different.
Oh.
But at the end, sort of, if we were to write a song about it, at the end, it would be, no, not so different. Okay. And my husband always thought that his father was way too busy for him.
Yeah.
And even though they had time together and they talked together, there was just something missing until the end of my father-in-law's life, when my husband spent time with him and caring for him. And he actually played the song for his father.
Oh,
now, we never got a real reaction, but our belief is that my father-in-law really understood it. Yeah. And in some ways was thanking my husband for being there at that time.
Yeah. Oh, my.
When I listened to the song, I was the youngest of three with two older brothers. And I always felt that my father was drawn to my brothers more than he was to me.
Mhm.
And I always saw him as being so busy.
Mm.
And, I'd run up to him and, Dad, I want your time. And, he'd say, I will, I will.
Mhm.
And next thing I know, he was with my brothers. I really was not neglected, but when I look back at it, that song brings out those moments. And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what I love about Harry's songs, like you were talking about. It's a story.
Yeah, and actually, I just did an interview with Jen Chapin yesterday, Harry's daughter, and we got into talking about the fact that that song in particular, and it's interesting that the lyrics for that were more from Harry's wife. And she wrote it, was writing it about her first husband and their children, right? But it also took on meaning in Harry's life because became so busy as an artist, right?
Right.
But the thing that Jen and I, talked about was how many other songs have become like a catchphrase. I mean,
Yep.
my first wife, when I would fall into that with our son, we'd just say, "Cats in the cradle, pal." Right? And I knew it was shorthand for "pay attention to your family." How many other songs reach that, have that sort of resonance with people that, like I said, they become a catchphrase. You also mentioned one other thing, if I could quickly, and to quote myself one more time. After I listened to the Harry Chapin songs, I say, I remember how they moved me so. Those melancholy tales of ordinary people caught up in life's travails. That's the other thing he specialized in, was writing just about ordinary people in our ordinary but extraordinary travails, right? That we all go through. So
Well, phenomenal performer, phenomenal writer as well. And, we talk about Harry as if he is still here,
he's,
which I think is quite interesting. Um, I was talking to my brother over the holiday when I knew I was going to be interviewing you. And I, I just said, yeah, we're going to be talking about Harry Chapin. And he looked at me and he goes, you do know that Harry has passed. And I said, yeah, I do. I do. But he's still with us.
yeah.
And it's almost like you are carrying on some of his music and his ideas as well.
Yeah, I have a radio promoter who's been hard at work, trying to line up spins, as I understand and he said there's with the radio programmers that have listened to Harry Chapin, said that there's been three responses. One, they love it. Two, they hate it. Or three, who the hell's Harry Chapin? So, in a way, if I can do anything that will help people search out for Harry Chapin a little bit, I'll be very happy about that.
Absolutely. So your album comes out, you said, in February.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Your album is um, a mix of different genres, or is it?
No, it's yes and no. I mean, in that, what the troubadours of the 70s did ranged, there was a lot of range, right? From you get Another Saturday Night, Cat Stevens, to, Out and Out, Fire and Rain by James. So there's a lot of variety in there anyway. But I would say all of my songs fit fairly well within that old school singer-songwriter genre. The one way that there may be a little bit different and distinctive is there's a little bit of jazz that still remains, right? It's not necessarily obvious. It's sometimes in the chord progressions, sometimes in the songs aren't syncopated, but the way I sing the melodies against them is syncopated. In fact, my producer, David Kershenbaum, incredible producer, has worked with everybody and anybody down through the years, including Cat Stevens. And when he was very young, he worked with Karen Carpenter, has worked with Joe Jackson, has worked with just a wonderful, long list of artists down through the years. He had a bit of a problem understanding where my melodies were landing on against the beat at first, because they're syncopated, right? So, but he figured that out and actually came to love it, I think. So he says.
Well, you always hope that your producer loves it.
That's for sure.
So this is coming out in February. Are you going to do a big presentation? Are you going to tour? What can we expect?
Yeah. And so when you said February, I said yes, but we're thinking about maybe moving it back a month for a particular reason. So I'm a native of Arizona, right? I grew up in Tucson, Arizona.
Okay.
And the leadoff song on the album, and I guess what you would call the second single from the album, is something called Arizona Skies, right? And it's a bit of a triptych. It goes through me living in Hollywood and visiting Ireland, living in Japan, and then making it back to Arizona. But the chorus of it is, I wander through this life, right, and marvel at the sight, but I never find Arizona skies. Have you been out west like that, Karen?
No, well, I take that back. My husband and I spent 2 days in Nevada, and we actually walked around in the desert, which freaked me out because I'd never seen anything like that before.
Well, if you had a chance to do that at night and you're away from the city, the stars are just so bright. You understand why they call it the Milky Way, right? So, North Carolina, where I live, is beautiful. It's wonderful. But because of the humidity at night, you don't get those views of the skies as much, right? So at any rate, what we want to do is, yes, do some album release performances in Arizona when it's warm enough that we can perform outside in Arizona. Now, given the way that the climate has been changing in Arizona, that's like very short period of time in March. Something like that. So it'll come out in February and March. And we're going to do some concerts in Arizona, keep to it.
Well, we certainly look forward to it. We're going to stay in touch so that we can let people know where you're going to be, because live entertainment is so much different than listening to it on our computer. And, I live for live entertainment. And I can't always afford to go to the concerts that I want to go to. But you know what? Then I go down the street to hear somebody local who I never would have heard of before. And it's like, wow, that was phenomenal.
Well, I suspect, especially for the short run, you will be able to afford my concerts.
Okay.
Here's kind of a cute fact, Karen. So I don't give away my exact age, but I would be able to get a senior discount for my own shows.
Oh. So you had mentioned, and I'm hoping I heard it right, that you went to the University of Michigan?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I did. Yeah.
Well, I have to say, go blue, because
go blue!
We are doing really well this year. And
how about that? Yes, we are.
Yeah. I'm originally from Michigan, and just about every member of my family went to Michigan. And it's difficult living in the state of Ohio.
I can imagine.
Yeah,
in enemy territory. Yeah. So what part of Michigan did you grow up in?
I actually grew up in Detroit.
Okay.
Right in the city. Yeah.
Wow.
And
so then, at University of Michigan, the ethnomusicology where I taught was in Burton Tower, the bell tower in the center of the main campus.
Right. Yep. Beautiful place to go.
If you ever heard Japanese or Indonesian music, coming from the windows, that was us.
That was you. Okay. Well, I'm so glad that we had this conversation today. I'm looking forward to the album, and I'm hoping our listeners will. We're going to put all this information in the show notes so that they can follow you, David. And please keep in touch, because if you ever get to Cleveland, maybe even playing at the Rock Hall, we'll get everybody out there to listen.
Oh, that'd
Okay.
be wonderful. Well, and I'll make sure you get a backstage pass, Kim.
I love it. I love it.
Which
Kim,
to me is still such a thing that I collect them, right?
I
when
love
I
it.
when I get the occasional chance to have one, so it's kind of like a trophy for me. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Well, you
Oh,
have a great day.
Karen,
Thank
this
you
has
so
been
much.
wonderful. Thank you so much, and for sure, let's keep in touch.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Yep. Bye.